afternoon all, and welcome to It Pays to Be Polarizing. I'm John, aka JB3, and I'm your host as the usual. Today I'm going to talk about legacy, history, tradition of families. One of the things that's done in many families is fathers name their firstborn son after themselves and become a junior, a third, a fourth, and so on down the line. You see it in royal families, you see it in a lot of European families, where you will see a second, a third, a junior, whichever they choose, whichever route. And in my family's case, it went from senior to junior, and I am the third. That's why JB3. And I will tell you that when I was younger, as a young man and as a young boy, I used to wonder why I was named after my father. Funny story for me was when I was a kid, trying out for baseball, first time, I was at the tryouts at the junior high school field, the front field. For those from my hometown, they'll know what it is, and they'll remember it. But that's where the tryouts were held that year for Marlboro Youth Baseball. Ooh, I gave away my hometown. And it's funny because there was the youth baseball and there was the junior league baseball. There were two, I think that's what it was. Well, little league baseball, there were two. And I was always in youth baseball, in the youth sports, that segment, and got to the tryouts and was out there, and I was a little kid. I don't remember. It was for the minor league tryouts at that point in time. I was out there trying out fielding ground balls at shortstop, getting some fly balls out in center field, whatever they were back then. They weren't really challenging, I don't think. Maybe. Could have been. But I just remember being out in the field and hearing somebody yell out, "Whose kid is that?" And my father yelled out, "That's my son. That's John." And one of the coaches, we were townies in the town, so it's one of those people knew my dad. And they said, "Digger, that's no way that's your kid." And my dad's nickname was Digger because we owned a funeral home at that point in time and we're part of that business. And they said, "There's no way that's your kid. You're not that athletic. Your kid is a little bit better of an athlete than you were." And so it was one of those that kind of stuck with me when I walked over and he's like, "John, come over here." I went over and stood by my dad, and I was all proud of it was my dad, and they were all having their fun, saying how bad he was at sports, how they couldn't understand how I was good at sports, how I was good at baseball. So as I grew up, I heard more stories about my dad and his accolades, we'll call them, for sports. They weren't great, but at least he tried, I'll say that much. And I won't say I was a superior athlete. I was good. I was great. I was good enough to play and enjoy some spots on teams, and was a leadoff hitter for most of the teams I played for, was a center fielder or second base shortstop for most of the teams I played on as well. So I had a key position on all the teams, and that was good. But back to the legacy part, because this is where it all comes together. I used to kind of be embarrassed by it a little bit because I didn't know why. They all had a good smile and a good "Hey, Digger, what's going on?" And they "Hey, Brownie, what's going on?" They would always say that. And my friends all called me Brownie. They didn't call me Digger because I was not a mortician, so that didn't really suit me, which was fine. They called me lots of other things. They had lots of nicknames as a child, and I take them all as good things. I was called Bomar by my neighborhood friends, and they'll probably say, "No, we never called you that." They did. It was kind of funny. I don't even know what that meant, but they called me that because I was smart, I guess, comparatively to most of them, except for one. I'll give Tom credit. Tom was smarter. Jim, not a chance. Bob, not a chance. Mike, hell no. Yep, if you all watch this, yeah, I called you out. It's kind of fun for me. Anyway, so every event I went to, I would go to events as a kid and as I go to my teens and then as an adult. I would say who I was, and they would say, "Oh, I know your dad," and they would have a great story about my dad. It was a memory that they had of my dad doing something good, making someone laugh, making someone feel good about themselves. And I grew older, I kind of thought about this and realized how important it was to share that name and how it was a good thing to have. It's been 20 years since my father passed. And it's funny because I got to spend the last few moments of his life with him. And it was a really positive thing. And I actually got to talk to him a little bit. I sang to him as he passed. But I also said to him I was very proud of the fact that he had chosen to give me his name, and that's why I'm a third. I look back at it now, and I wish I'd told him that sooner, a lot sooner than I did, but I did tell him that I was very proud of it. I know he understood me. I know he heard me. But it's one of those things that if you're named after your father, it's not a bad thing. It's one of those that he took pride in who he was. At least my dad did. I will say that for sure. He was very, very friendly, very gregarious. Just a guy that people liked having around. And I can be that way too. There are times that I'm not. I'll admit that because I'm opinionated. I'm stubborn. I'm obstinate. All those things. But I'll also go above and beyond for anybody that's in my life. And that's one thing my dad passed down to me, is that it doesn't matter how tough your life is, how bad things have gotten for you. Always be there for your friends. Always be there to be the person that they know they can count on, to show up when they're supposed um, to be the person that they can call in a time of need, even in a time of celebration. That you're one of the first ones they think of. I've even had that through professional life, not because of my dad, but because of things I've done. I've had people call me when they've had their milestones at work, when they've gotten something new. I've been the first or second call for someone when they've gotten their clearance from cancer diagnosis. I've been the first person someone has called when they were knowing that their time was coming to an end. That was hard too. But every one of those calls I would take again in a heartbeat, because it means a lot. And that's all attributed to the way my father and my mother raised me. So I'm proud to have the name of my father. I'm proud to be a third. And I like the fact that my dad is that person that when people thought of him, it always put a smile on their face. And I hope I do the same. Anyway, enough for me being sappy and whatnot. This is It Pays to Be Polarizing. Please like, subscribe, and comment. Again, I am John, JB3. Have a good day.